Welcome home. I'm Tamara Alicia, your host, and this is Soul Drops, a podcast dedicated to the expansion of the heart, mind, and soul, a safe place for reflection, healing, and self-understanding. Take a deep breath with me, and let's begin. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Soul Drops. I am your host, Tamara Alicia, and as always, let's jump into today's topic. So, today, this episode was actually inspired by an event that I went to last week. And someone's comment actually was about the power of productive tension. And I loved it so much that I kind of built a whole episode around it. And I wanted to really dig into that, especially with today's climate. So, normally I don't talk about politics on podcasts, like on my personal podcast. But with today's climate, I feel like it would be remiss and very tone deaf of me to not talk about the larger picture of what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling and what others are feeling and what's going on. And so today we're going to hop into talking about leaning into discomfort. I know that we talked about being comfortable with being uncomfortable last episode. And so we're going to continue to push forward with that. And we're going to talk about the kind of emotional and spiritual stretch that happens when we choose to have conversations that make us feel uncomfortable, but are definitely absolutely necessary. Before we get into it, I need to say that I personally don't use the word race in a way that society has taught us to. I believe that there's only one race, the human race. What we're really talking about when we say race is ethnicity and nationality. Race as we know it was constructed. It was designed to divide us, to have for certain people to have control, and to rank people in a hierarchy that has nothing to do with the truth of who they are. And it has everything to do with one person or one party having power while the other ones don't have as much power or any at all. Now, for context, the term race began to take shape during the 17th and 18th century, especially in colonial Europe. And it was a way to justify slavery, colonization, and exploitation. And the pseudoscience was used to group people by physical characteristics and claim superiority of one group over another. It was never rooted in any type of real science, real biology. It was just always about control. So while today's conversation was inspired by an event that I went to last week called Race Unity Day, I want you to know that I carry the awareness that when I use the word race, it is more so in a societal context than me actually believing that race is a real construct. Because, as I said, that's not something that I subscribe to. And I am a true advocate in words matter. So the language that I'm using to describe something matters. When I say race and I'm speaking to a general public, I know that they know I mean ethnicity. Like I'm African American. This person is, whatever ethnicity they are. So I want to just be very clear about that. And I also feel as though we can't keep using these broken terms if we plan on building a better society and a better world for all of us. And if we do continue to use them, then they're always going to be used as tools of division. Now, as I said, I was invited to the Race Unity Day, and it was a beautiful gathering at a Baha'i center, and the theme was centered around patience, prayer, and preservation, if I'm not mistaken. At the Baha'i Center, the people came from all different walks of life, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, generations, genders, and we were kind of all sitting in this community style way and just talking openly about power dynamics, identity and kind of like all of the ways that we have been petitioned against each other in society when really that division is not warranted. There was something very grounding and real about being in this space because I didn't feel the need to sugarcoat what I was going to say. Not that I do that anyway, but I didn't feel the need as though I had to kind of downplay the experience of being a Black person in America. There was no performance, there was no pretending, there was no sugarcoating. People that were different from me, that are in different positions in society, just showed up and they listened and they reflected on my experiences. And I also reflected on theirs. And I do understand that sometimes these situations and these types of conversations can be very uncomfortable. But I think that's the part that we should appreciate the most when we're able to have these conversations because they open up a whole new dynamic where you really get to see that we're actually not so different at all. And it's these fake barriers that separate us and make us think that we are. And instead of uniting us and creating more love and more openness and more acceptance, it is a constant attempt of separation, especially in this country. Throughout the event, there were different workshops that you could go in and you could work on, but it all was centered around the theme of patience, prayer, and perseverance, and under this title or under this umbrella of Race Unity Day. And during a reflection, I don't remember exactly who said it, but someone described the experience as productive tension, which is inspired this episode actually. And it hit me like that's exactly what it was because all of the conversations that were happening at everybody's workshop were real conversations. They were authentic, they were unfiltered. And that's the kind of shift that we need as a society. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't come without tension or some uncomfortable feelings because we are now talking to the person or people that are supposed to be our oppressors or the people that divide and conquer and separate us. But these conversations have to start somewhere. And that tension doesn't always have to be destructive. It can actually be quite productive. Now, productive tension, in my opinion, is that tight feeling that you get in your chest when you're stretched past your comfort zone. And we all know that feeling. It's like, do I say this thing? Do I not say this thing? Do I take a deep breath and try and, like listen to the situation? What do I do? And it happens when we stop avoiding the hard stuff and start engaging in honesty. And I have a specific example about that, or kind of like a specific story that I would like to tell you all. And I'm not going to give the full story, but I will definitely tell you some of it. So recently, I took my son to meet a friend that lives in New Hampshire. And that was about a 6.5 hour drive, 6.5, 7 hour drive, maybe. And the people that we went to see are not African Americans. They are of European descent. So white people in this country is white Americans, I guess, would be what they would self identify as. And that's important for the context of the story. Prior to arriving in New Hampshire, there was a few conversations that happened to make me think that this person has never had close relationships with people of color. Maybe they've worked with them in a general setting, but never like over to their house to have conversations or hang out or anything like that. So I was very cognizant of that. And the day before we left, the individual sent me a message stating that she felt bad that my son, who's 11, had to call her Miss Insert First Name here because she felt as though there was a power dynamic that she had over him by him respecting someone that is way older than her, way older than him, calling her Miss. And she went into this whole extremely long text message about the power dynamic and how little white boys and little white girls, and it was just very strange. And I had to read the text message multiple times before responding because it completely threw me for a loop that she attached a meaning to my son being respectful to racism. And so I had to explain to her that it was just due to a sign of respect. I would have my son call her Miss Insert Name here. And it has nothing to do with the color of someone's skin. It just has to do with respectfulness and raising my child with manners. And that she actually had no power over him. So she didn't have to worry about that. And so that was the first thing that allowed me to know that this was definitely going to be a situation and where I would have to explain things and that I would need patience and I would need to be open to the fact that this was most likely going to be a learning experience for both of us, especially for her, because I don't think that she has had any personal in house relationships with Black people. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Myra, 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 you're being judgy, you're assuming. And I asked this person if they have ever had any close relationships with Black people. And I was told that there was a fling that happened in college with a Black man from Africa. So take that as you will. Upon arrival, we were informed that she had dogs, I think three or four of them. And we weren't afraid of dogs, so it wasn't a big deal for us. But when we got inside, the dogs were barking, which is normal because dogs typically bark when it's people in their home that they don't know, that they've never seen, never smelled, new scents. So it's pretty typical. So instead of just saying, oh, the dogs don't know you, that's why they're barking, the individual says, oh, your son is such a big Black boy, because my son is very tall. That's why the dogs are barking. Me and my son looked at each other like, what? Like, what? What are you talking about? The dogs are barking because they've never seen him before. They've never seen me before. We're complete strangers in your house. So that was the first thing. So after that, and my son's 11, by the way. So after that, I decided to have a conversation with her because we, as me and her decided that if there were any uncomfortable moments, that we would talk about them. And so I decided it's time to have an uncomfortable conversation, right? So we sat down at the kitchen table and we were talking. And I told her how maybe that was, slightly racist. And I had to explain to her that the dogs were barking because we're strangers in their house and not because my son is tall and Black. And she proceeded to say, it's just because he's so tall and he was standing next to my little white girl because her daughter is short. And it kind of like she kind of went further down this path of digging the hole deeper, and I had to bring her back, and I kept reminding her that no, that's not why that happened. And then I asked her, so does your dogs react like this to every Black person that comes over? Because she told me that other Black people have been to her house. So if the dogs were just barking that way because my son was Black, that means that maybe they've never seen another Black person. So she kind of backtracked on her statement of that actually happening. So that was day one. We were there for a weekend, guys. So now we are on day two, and there was no rest for the weary that day either, guys. She again made another racist statement. And this one was so just mindlessly said that I called my son and I told him it's time to go. And he was like, Mom, why? I really want to continue to hang out with my friend. Can you please just have a conversation with her? Just talk to her. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. So I took a breath and I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll talk to her and I'll let you know how it goes. So we ended up sitting down and we ended up having a conversation. And I had to explain to her that her words can be weaponized against my son and myself because of the way that the power dynamics are set up in this world, especially in America. And she initially started crying and things of that nature. And I also had to explain to her why her tears as a white woman wouldn't work in the way that they normally work in society. We can have a conversation, but what I won't do is be guilted into your tears when you have the power in this dynamic while I am in your home with my child. So, after she got over the tears and we were able to have a conversation, she started to understand a little more of what I was saying and how her mindlessly saying these things can not only be dangerous for people of color, but also just come across as very ignorant and also tone deaf. Now, I just want to say that I don't believe that she was inherently racist. In my opinion, she just lacked real life experiences and a relationship to Black people. She talked a lot about being an ally. She talked a lot about Black books that she had read. She talked a lot about being a part of community, I guess maybe virtually, where she would write pieces about allyship. But that is not the same thing as having an actual relationship. And so there were lots of moments throughout the time that we were there that seemed overbearing. And by overbearing, what I mean is, in my opinion, I was just a mom going to meet another mom so that our kids could hang out and have a great time. The fact that she was white and her child were white didn't make a difference for me. The experience and always pointing out the fact that we were different when she was trying to prove that we are more alike than different was very overbearing. And the allyship seemed somewhat performative and exorbitant. But I also understand that she was just trying to prove to me that, hey, I'm not a racist person. I don't agree with racist ideology. And I'm not KKK adjacent. And I just want you to understand that. And I just want you to know that. But also, I think that what she didn't understand was it doesn't matter how much you consider yourself to be an ally and how many articles you write and how many books you read. If you're not having real relationships and real conversations with the people that you want to be an ally for. And we had to go through conversations about book learning allyship and actual relationship allyship and what that looks like and how lived experience, no matter how much she read about Black people and the Black experience, and no matter how much she went to protests, no matter how much she wrote articles, there was always going to be this lack of experience of Blackness that she would never be able to intrinsically understand. So we moved on to something both of us could understand, being mothers. And my experience as a Black mother is different from hers. And what it is like specifically to be a Black mother in America. And I gave her an example. During the time that we were there, she went and got the kids water guns to play with. I personally do not allow my child to play with water guns or anything that resembles a gun. Why? Because we live in America. I had to explain to her that anything that resembles a gun, even if it's in fun colors, could be potentially dangerous and life threatening to my son if a racist police officer decided that his life was in danger from an 11-year-old child. I said that to her. She said, like Tamir Rice. And I said, exactly. And I noticed that there was a light bulb moment for her, a moment of understanding where she slightly felt the panic that I feel as a Black mother. And she asked me, is there anything that he can do that is safe outside? Is there any way for him to just be a kid? And my answer was no, not really. Not here, not in America. Even if I were to let him ride his bike to school, like all of the other white children in the neighborhood, I have to worry about if some cop will see him and think that he is threatening or bothers him just for riding his bike to school, and if my son will come home or not. That's a real thing that a Black mother has to think about when it comes to her children, son or daughter. That conversation just between two moms, not a mom that happened to be white, not a mom that happened to be Black, just moms that cared about their kids, was the commonality. That was the thing that made us the same. And from that point on, there were no other comments that were made. There were no other conversations that we had to have regarding anything that entire trip. It was more just laughs and having a good time after that. That was probably one of the most uncomfortable weekends of my entire life. And it was also the most lightning and grounding and beautiful experiences to have at the end. And I am so glad that we got to have it. Because how often are we able to have interactions like that where people say racist things, not intentionally, but just because they lack personal experience? And I don't blame her. I think sometimes that when we people grow up in parts of the world or parts of certain states or cities, we get secluded and we don't have diversity. We don't have friends that we talk to on a regular basis that have different cultures or speak different languages or different colors or whatever the case is. And because of that, because we live in these little segregated bubbles, especially in the US, feel as though we don't get that exposure. And I can tell you now that when I was in New Hampshire, me and my son were the only ones that I saw of color. And I was there for 3 days and I didn't see anyone that looked like me. There was no one there with melanin, y'all. There was no one. And so, I mean, I was only in one part of New Hampshire, but the part that I was in was extremely rural. So maybe that's also why. But I think that if we can have this type of understanding and not move from a place of emotion, but try to move from a place of understanding, then we could get very far. A lot of the division that we have could end with understanding and acceptance. And that weekend taught me that. I was willing to hear her perspectives that challenged my own. And sitting in that silence after she said those things and having to like calm myself and be like, okay, Myra, you can have a conversation about this. You can have a conversation without rushing to feel like you need to attack or defend. Just stay open, even when parts of you want to shut down this experience, and stay neutral. Maybe there is just education that is needed. Maybe there is just empathy that is needed. Maybe there is just understanding that's needed. But this kind of tension make space for growth. And I can definitely tell that there was growth between both of us that had to happen. The amount of patience that I gathered within myself, I didn't even know I had, to be honest with you. And the amount of understanding I didn't know was there. To be completely honest, this was an amazing experience on both sides. I'm grateful for her coming into my life and allowing me to learn this lesson, because it definitely revealed some blind spots that I had. And it definitely deepened my empathy and for sure helped to build a bridge and not ignoring, running away from how I felt. Instead of running away and leaving angry, sat there and I talked it out, even when situation seemed crazy. Find that when we avoid these types of conversations about identity and power and privilege and history, we're not creating peace. We're just pretending that things are fine. And that is one of the biggest problems that we have in the US, is that we don't want to talk about the things that are uncomfortable. And because we don't want to talk about the things that are uncomfortable, what happens is they just get swept under the rug. The issues are never dealt with. And maybe there's some type of thing that comes out of it, like a statue or a holiday, instead of actually dealing with the root problem. It's not dealing with the monster that is now growing under the rug because so much shit, honestly, has been swept under it. And we have to stop doing this. We have to stop being like this. Have these conversations that feel uncomfortable. If you feel like you're about to scream, like you can't take a breath, and have the conversation. This world has taught us to avoid tension, to be polite, to not ever experience any type of discomfort, to basically shut up and keep it polite. But politeness doesn't change anything. Politeness just protects the status quo and allows things to continue the way that they are without any type of advancement. And the silence that we keep, it just upholds everything that we say we want to heal from. We cannot move past racism unless we have a conversation about it. And don't get me wrong, I know that it's definitely going to take way more than a conversation, especially when it comes to systematic racism and the inception of this country being based off of violence, genocide, and racism. I am fully aware of this, but we got to start somewhere. Getting back to the gathering at the Baha'i Center, what I saw in that room from people of all different ethnicities, all different walks of life, age groups, was courage. People of all backgrounds being honest, being vulnerable, choosing to face tension together. No one yelled, no one screamed. It was honestly all love. And just not surface level love, just like real understanding, real patience, real kindness, real hugs. And I think that we need to do more of that. Stop worrying all the time if what you have to say, the person will misunderstand you, because you can always explain what you actually meant. Or you can always start off, your statement with something like, I'm not sure about this, but this is what I think. And I hope you understand this. And if you don't, if you have any questions, let's talk about it. But we have to start somewhere. So, similar to the last episode, I have some reflection questions for you all. And I want you to really think about these. Just don't, turn off the episode and think, oh, that was nice. I want you to really reflect on these questions. And I'm also going to include these questions in the show notes. When was the last time you felt tension in a conversation and you stayed instead of shutting it down? And you actually followed through with the conversation, whether it turned out for the good, for the bad, whatever it was, but you stayed instead of shutting down the conversation. Because a lot of us, when we start feeling uncomfortable, we shut that shit down. What part of you gets activated in moments like this? Do you think that you are healing when you have these conversations? Lastly, I want you to think about how you can create spaces in which open dialogue like this can happen. How you create rules and structure and protection in these spaces to make sure that everyone has an equal voice and can share and doesn't feel attacked, because these conversations are important. And holding space for these conversations is as equally important. Holding space can look like a lot of different things. It can look like having a conversation with someone that you normally wouldn't talk to, or having a conversation with your family or friends that you never normally talk about or you avoid for whatever reason that is. Holding space for those types of conversations will bring to light a lot of beliefs and misunderstandings that people hold, and sometimes even curiosity of things that they want to talk about, but they may feel isolated or may not feel like they have a safe space to even bring up and have those conversations with. And during these conversations, I want you to stay open. Leave your expectations at the door of whatever you think will happen. Leave it at the door and come in with an open mind and an open heart and discernment. And I also want you to come in as a active listener. I don't want you to come in as someone that is listening just to respond, because if that's what you're doing, you're not listening. I want you to actually hear what the person has to say. Try and put yourself in their shoes and understand their perspective without connecting your emotions to what their experience is, to what their words are. We have to try and get on some type of even ground if we want to have uncomfortable conversations about anything, whether that be ethnicity, whether that be wealth gaps, whether that be religion, whatever it is, whatever the difference of opinions, ideology, whatever it is, there has to be some type of mutual ground from respect, from understanding that we can come to have these conversations, to have this important dialogue. As I end this episode, I just want to leave you all with one little soul drop. The presence of discomfort does not mean that the conversation is wrong. Sometimes it means that we're finally getting real. If this episode spoke to you in some kind of way, I encourage you to just stay open and stay grounded, and most of all, stay in the conversation. Share this episode with someone who's also doing the work, someone who's also having these uncomfortable conversations. I will be back on Friday with the bonus episode as promised. Other than that, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. And if you want to explore this kind of work in a deeper way, I am available for one-on-ones, and you can find the link in my show notes or on my website. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Soul Drops. I am your host, Tamara Alicia, and I'll catch you on the next one.